Over the next 30 minutes, I'm gonna, sort of discuss our journey from recovery to continuous access with HYCU R-Serve for iManage. My name is Ashish Rao. I'm a senior product marketing manager here, and very, very excited to finally announce this to the rest of the world, something that we've been working on for the past couple of months. So a quick intro to get started of HYCU. HYCU is the number one AI resilience company and the number one SaaS data protection company. We've got close to 5,000 customers across 78 different countries. We've got a lot of different strategic alliances with some of the top uh, organizations in the industry. iManage being one of them. We also do work with a lot of channel partners across the globe. We have about 450 plus channel partners, and you can see some of the marquee customers that we actually work with, like Pfizer, Toshiba, etc. Okay, with that, so the first thing that I want to sort of quickly recap. I'm sure we've got a bit of a mixed crowd today. Some of them already know a lot about HYCU. Some of them are in fact using HYCU to protect their data with us today, and some of them may be new. So let me give a quick recap of what we do or where we are today with the data resilience or data protection for iManage. Um, so today with HYCU R-Cloud, we offer the backup and recovery piece for your iManage data, right? Which means that you have automated offsite backups. Everything's automated in your storage. You have total flexibility over how frequently you want to back up that data, where you want to store it, how long you want to retain for. Completely flexible and in your control. Granular and bulk recovery. So it could be a single document, it could be an entire workspace, right? So with HYCU R-Cloud today, you can recover that on demand. And with these documents, of course, you have all the file versions and all the security settings and all of that. So you do have that flexibility of what you want to recover whenever you want it. And complete data ownership, one of a very, very important thing, especially when it comes to iManage data, is to ensure that customers own their data. They manage it, they own it, and it's always under their control, right? So HYCU never stores any of the customer's data throughout the entire process, right? So from the beginning till the end, it's all happening in the customer's environment and they own the data at all times. So they have total flexibility again over, where they want to store it in terms of its storage provider, which storage tier, and, yeah, how they want to sort of manage in which region as well. So from a residency and data sovereignty perspective, they have complete flexibility and control over there. And finally, immutability. All of these backups are immutable, which means that in case of a ransomware attack, even if the attacker gets to the backups, they will not be able to modify, delete, encrypt backups in any shape or form. So these backups are something you can safely and securely rely on and recover from. Now, with that, the one of so with the whole recovery and backup piece, what we were able to sort of solve is if there was any incident with in terms of accidental deletions or data being corrupted, or you want to recover data that was deleted maybe like 6 months back, which you don't have in your trash or in your iManage anymore. So the recovery piece, which is the HYCU R-Cloud part of it, was basically solving that part of the problem, right? And definitely something that a lot of customers, a lot of iManage customers today are leveraging because there are incidents that happen like accidental deletions, or we've seen a lot of automations changing or corrupting the data, which you will sort of come back to HYCU, recover that these sort of documents or a folder or a workspace and bring it back to iManage, right? So that definitely is a very, very valuable piece of the data resilience story where you can recover after an incident, right? But there is one thing that kept coming up in all of our conversations with iManage customers over the last 1 year or so after we went GA with the HYCU R-Cloud part of it. The common thing that kept coming up is, yeah, yes, we can, if something happens, yes, we can definitely recover that data. We can, export it and bring it back onto, iManage. And what we also have available very soon is the ability to directly restore that, right? So that's all fine from the perspective of an incident has occurred, something has happened to the data. the data is lost, corrupted, whatever it is, right? But what happens if the data is intact? Everything is completely fine. It exists on the library, documents are there, folders, workspaces, everything. But what if we just can't reach that data, right? And that's the second part of the problem, which we started hearing a lot. Which again, from a law firm perspective, given the importance and the criticality of that data, it's very important that they cover all areas, all sort of gaps in terms of their business continuity planning, that if for any reason that data itself was not reachable, it's intact but not reachable, how do we continue working, right? And of course, it's a very rare occurrence where that could happen, because we all know, as I'm sure all of us on this session know, that iManage itself is a very, very resilient platform, right? From an infrastructure perspective, they've got availability zones. They've got a lot of things figured out from the infra point of it, and also on the platform with things like trash and journaling, etc., where you can definitely do bits of recovery, and it also ensures that you always have that uptime and that availability to the platform. But things do happen, right? Incidents do happen. Cloud outages do happen. We've seen that with Azure. We've seen that with AWS or GCP, even the large, these are all the large ones, right? So they do happen. Of course, they're rare, but they do happen. And in those cases, for any law firm, the kind of impact that it can cause because of that inaccessibility, even for a very short period of time, is very, very significant. So we looked into what that looks like. What is that impact, right? So from our research, we found out that even for a law firm with around 200 attorneys, and on an average, let's say, for an example, around 2 hours of outage, the impact that it can cause on billable time is close to $500,000, which is massive, right? For larger firms, that just magnifies and sort of exponentially grows in terms of the impact and the loss in revenue. But that's just the tangible part of it. There is also the intangible part of it, which that $500,000 does not cover, which is a reputational damage, you missing out on deadlines, your client SLA, legal exposure, and even client churn, right? So the inaccessibility to that data, not being able to reach or access, even though the data is intact, can cause a massive impact. And of course, it's a rare incident, but even if it happens for just an hour or 2 hours once a year, it's still a huge, huge impact, right? So with that, to solve that problem is what that's when we worked on R-Serve. And for the first time, very happy to introduce all of you to meet R-Serve. And R-Serve is HYCU's continuous access layer. Basically, it provides uninterrupted continuous access for admins and lawyers to their iManage data. So even if for any reason it's not reachable or not accessible, they can just switch to R-Serve to continue accessing their data and continue their work and not miss out on deadlines, not miss out on any kind of commitments, right? So some of these things that the key highlights of what the solution has. First thing is it's always on and always ready, which basically means that you don't need to wait for an incident to happen, or you don't need to wait for you losing out on access or your access being interrupted. It's always running in the background, right? So it's a service that runs in your cloud. It's up and running at all times, and in the moment, if something happens, you can quickly switch over because it's always active and running in the background. Second thing is self-serve access. Self-serve access is basically where admins, of course, can also log into it and recover. But one of the other key points when it comes to where our cloud was facing a bottleneck was that if the access were to be sort of interrupted, you can definitely go back to our cloud, you can recover that data, you can export that. But that means for, let's imagine for 1,000 attorney firm, that means the number of tickets that the IT team or the admins have to resolve for recovery within a very short period of time is massive. And it creates a big bottleneck, right? How much can one admin team do? They can definitely prioritize things, but then there's so many different partners and attorneys working on their documents, which is very, very critical at that particular point in time. And but they will not be able to cater to all of them. And by the time they do, that's going to take them a few hours at the least, right? Which beats the whole purpose of the whole immediate continuous access, which is why the whole self-serve access part when it comes to our serve, where attorneys or the users themselves can log into the platform directly and access whatever they have access to in terms of the iManage data, download the documents, and continue working offline until the service is restored again. Then the access that we have on our serve is permission aware. It's based on the, for each user, it's based on the documents that they own and operate on iManage, right? And the other thing is everything runs in your cloud. As I was mentioning, with our cloud, we always ensure that everything is owned by the customer, everything is running in the customer's environment, and they are the final owner of all of their data. The same applies with ourselves. That's something that HYCU is very, very careful about, especially when it comes to iManage data. Everything runs in their cloud, in their control. It's their own infrastructure. They manage and control everything. We do not have any of that data. Then it's a familiar interface which I'll be showing you shortly in the demo, where it looks very similar to how you would manage search for documents, download documents on iManage. So for the users, it's not much of a learning curve, right? So for them, it's just switch off an interface. They can just continue working the way they've been working on iManage, the way they've been searching for documents on iManage, the way they've been downloading things on iManage, right? Or managing the versions as well. And finally, back to work instantly, which basically means that for admins or users, we use the same SSO, we leverage the same existing SSO that they use to log into iManage as well. So for them, they don't have to manage new credentials, learn a new way to sort of authenticate and get into or use a different interface. It's all very, very seamless. Use the same SSO, um, have a very familiar interface, and just continue working, right? So to just give a very quick high-level overview of what the process looks like, the first thing we need to do to enable all of this sort of continuous access on our server is to ensure that the exports are automated and they're enabled, right? So basically here, what I want to say is the data that is being served to our server essentially is the data that is being exported from the backups that they take on our cloud, right? So which basically means that they need to be protecting their iManage data on our cloud for it to be exported to their own storage, and then the R serve picks up that data and shows that data, uses that data to serve the users and admins, right? So the first step that we need to take to sort of enable this entire process and keep it up and running is to ensure that the automated incremental exports are enabled and configured so that HYCU knows that we need to export this data as and when we take the backups, right? In the same incremental fashion, right? So all of the backups are incremental as well. And with the same schedule and the same cycle, the exports will be incremental onto the customer storage as well. And once that is done, we have a persistent VM running in the customer's cloud, which is always on and always on standby, as I was mentioning. So it's always running in the background. You do not have to do anything after something has happened, because that definitely is going to take time and all of that panic. You don't want to spend the next few minutes and hours setting something up. All you want to do is quickly switch over, right? So it's always on standby. And as I was mentioning again, for users, it's very simple to authenticate. We leverage the same SSO, so the same SSO that you would use, something like an Enter ID that you would use to log into your iManage library, will be the same over here. So for them, it's just the same process. There's nothing new for them to learn, right? Just authenticate. Once they log in, they can search for the documents, download and draft the documents locally. And once the service is back up, they can manually re-upload that document back to the service, right? And of course, I'll be showing you, bits of what the view looks like shortly. So there are two different views I've been discussing. The first thing is from a user perspective, and of course we'll go through both of them. The first thing is from a user perspective, they can download the entire. They can download single documents and also individual versions. So you can actually go down to particular versions if you only want to download or access a particular version of a document. Then you can they can access everything without raising a ticket. So let's say access is interrupted, they don't really need to raise a ticket, wait for the IT team to tell them what to do next. All they have to do is switch over to the R-Serve interface, authenticate, start browsing, and all everything without a ticket. It is read-only access, so we do not have editing on our server because, of course, we don't want to create a parallel way of sort of changing and managing the change and conflicts of the documents. So everything is read-only. Once the service is back up, it's just a simple process of uploading that back to iManage. And from an administrator's perspective, the scope that admins have on our server is much wider. So they can actually download documents in bulk as opposed to what users can do, where they can download documents one at a time. And this is by design because we don't want to, or we want to ensure that there's minimal sprawl of documents happening while they work offline, right? If documents were, if they would be able to download documents in bulk, which would mean they would just download entire folders at once and have a lot of files offline, which is not in sync with the whole production, right? So that's one of the things by design we've ensured that we minimize the sprawl that happens. But administrators, of course, in a scenario where they need to download something in bulk and share it further with other users, they will be able to still do it via our serve. And they, of course, have a lot of advanced filtering options, which I'll show you shortly, because they have a much wider scope. They have to sift through millions of documents. So there are multiple filtering options that will help them narrow it down significantly. They have complete visibility over the indexing and sync status, which basically is the sync between the backup and the export data, and everything on the platform on our service is logged. Every sign in, every authentication, every download, anything that they access is all logged, right? And that is something that the administrator can view as well. Okay, so now with that, I'm gonna quickly switch to a demo. So just to take you through what the solution looks like. Okay, so the first thing, as I was mentioning, the first step that we need to take when it comes to enabling this entire process is to ensure that your automated incremental exports are configured, right? And this is something that we do on our cloud, where you take backups and can recover your data, which is what a lot of customers are already leveraging. So all we need to do is in the configuration for that particular library, just click on the configuration, enable the continuous data export, select which target you want to export it to, which typically in most cases that we recommend and we've seen, customers will want to have a separate bucket besides the one that is used for all the backups, right? So you would export to that particular bucket. And the other interesting thing is that you can select from when or from what point you want to export that data. So for example, in this one, I've taken from the beginning of the year. You could also do, let's say, a date that was 3 months ago, or maybe a month back, whatever it is, right? Or if you want to keep an entire year's data exported and ready for access, you could also do that. So that's completely up to you. And once you've set that up, you have the R-Serve running as a service in the background. So let's look at what the user's view would look like. So as I was saying, you can leverage the existing SSO, right? So you have, in this case, the example is Microsoft. So for a user, it's really simple. Just click on this, you get the Microsoft, or Enter ID SSO, screen. They know what to do after that. Very simple process, something they're used to doing every day, right? Once they have authenticated, they can see all the different workspaces that they have access to. They can see the recent matters, the documents, folders, etc. And they can drill down to specific folders, and within those folders they can see all of the documents that they have, right? And from here they can also individually download all of these different documents. Now by default, when they click on download over here, what we do is we download the latest version, but they will also be able to navigate, sort of go through different versions and download specific versions if they want, right? So they don't want the current one, they want this version 2, or whatever the previous version was. The entire list appears here, and they can navigate through that and download what they want. Then in terms of filtering, on top of course, the exports itself or exports themselves being scoped to a particular period, what users can do on top of that is further filter the data using some certain, time frames. It could be things that were modified and or created today, over the last 30 days, yesterday, whatever that is. Or it could also be, a custom time range, right? So you can see that previously we had more documents in the list here, but now that we've filtered to last 30 days, we've got a narrower set of documents for me to look at. And they can also, of course, search through the entire library. Obviously, it does search through the entire library, but it is still scoped to only the data that they are either an author or an operator for. So here I'm just using 108 as an example. We can search using the document ID, or it also searches using the title. So you can see both are being fetched here, and you can search and sort of filter through whatever exactly you want across the entire library. Now that's the user part of it. Let's take a quick look at the admin side of things. So the admin, as I was saying, has a much wider scope, right? So they have access to all the different. They can actually, switch between these different libraries as well. They have access to all the different workloads, and within if they want to download something, as I was mentioning previously, admins can do bulk downloads, right? So they can select multiple documents and download that as a zip. Typically useful when they want to sort of further share these to users who are, in bulk. And users typically do just, single document, the one that they're working on currently. And as I was mentioning, so they also have advanced filtering options. They can do it using the document type, using the document size, or again, a date range between which something was modified or created, right? So that gives you a much narrower list. Advanced filtering options, of course, very useful for admins because they have to sift through millions of documents to get to the right document that they want. And you can also see that there is a manual sync option here as well, which basically ensures that they can manually initiate a sync for them to stay in sync with the exported data and with the backup data and the exported data. And finally, as I was mentioning, there is also the entire audit log. So every single action on R-Serve, whether somebody is downloading something, accessing something, they've authenticated or signed in to the platform, everything is logged. So if you want to come back from an audit perspective, every single action, everything that is being downloaded will be available here. So if we want to know at the end of it what documents have finally been downloaded, and to ensure that we make sure that the users eventually do sort of sync it back with the production, this is where you would come to understand what is being downloaded, right? So that's a very quick view. Of course, there's much more to it, and maybe in a personalized demo, you can get a more deeper or a, sort of more elaborate view into how this looks. But just a very quick overview of from the sort of setting up the automated incremental exports to actually the different views that both users and admins have. This is a very quick view of it. All right, so to sum things up, as I was mentioning, there were two different problems that we saw, right? The first thing that we did solve for is with our cloud, where we wanted, sort of we offered the solution for customers to back up and recover the data. The second thing was to ensure that they have continuous access if in the rare, scenario, something happens where their access is no longer access to their data is no longer available, right? So that's the R-Serve part. But what you can also see here on the right is the common thing is all of this happens in the customer's cloud under their control, right? The backup storage, the export storage, from wherever, we are pulling the data from iManage to storing it somewhere to where we're reading that data to provide continuous access. Everything is within the customer's infrastructure. All HYCU does is facilitate that entire process. So that's pretty much summing it up in terms of where we were before, what we're moving to from recovery to actual continuous access for iManage, and how you can actually, what are the different capabilities and how you can navigate through different things. So I think now we can open it up to Q&A. And of course, feel free to scan these QR codes. You could book a personalized demo, for you to sort of, as I was saying, get a more elaborate view into how this entire thing works and what it looks like. Or you can explore the same product tour as well, just for, get like a quick click through version of it.